I always knew that the old house on the edge of town was haunted. As a child, I would walk by it on my way to school and feel a shiver run down my spine. But I never imagined that I would one day find myself living there, alone and surrounded by the restless spirits that called it home. It all started when I inherited the house from my great-aunt. She had lived there for years, never leaving the property, and had left behind a treasure trove of antiques and oddities. I was thrilled to own a piece of history, and I eagerly moved in, ready to explore the house and all its secrets. At first, everything seemed normal. I spent my days cleaning and rearranging the rooms, marveling at the vintage furniture and the ornate wallpaper. But then, things started to change. It started with the footsteps. Late at night, I would hear them echoing through the empty halls, heavy and deliberate. I assumed it was just the old floorboards settling, but then I started to hear whispers too. Soft, hissing voices that seemed to come from nowhere. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself that it was just my imagination. But then, I started to see things. Shadows that moved on their own, objects that shifted and changed when I wasn't looking. And the worst part was the feeling that I was being watched. It was like a pair of eyes were always on me, even when I was alone. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself that there was a logical explanation. But deep down, I knew that something was wrong. And then, one night, I saw her. She was standing at the foot of my bed, dressed in a long, flowing dress that seemed to glow in the dark. Her hair was long and dark, and her face was twisted into a grimace of rage. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was paralyzed with fear. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her anger emanating from her like a physical force. And then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she was gone. But her presence lingered, and I knew that I was no longer alone in the house. After that, things only got worse. I would wake up to find scratches on the walls, as if something had been trying to claw its way through. The whispers turned into screams, and the footsteps grew louder and more frequent. I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what. One day, I decided to do some research on the house. I went to the library and searched through old newspapers and records. And that's when I found out the truth. The house had been built in the 1800s by a wealthy family. But tragedy struck when their daughter, a beautiful young woman named Elizabeth, fell in love with a man her parents disapproved of. They forbade the relationship, and Elizabeth was heartbroken. One day, she disappeared, and was never seen again. But the rumors said that she had been murdered by her own parents, who couldn't bear the shame of their daughter's disobedience. Her body was never found, and it was said that her ghost still haunted the house, seeking revenge on those who had wronged her. I knew then that I had to leave the house. I couldn't stay there any longer, with the angry spirit of Elizabeth lurking around every corner. But as I started to pack my bags, I realized that it was too late. She had already claimed me as her own. I could feel her rage building, like a storm on the horizon. And then, in a sudden burst of fury, she attacked. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, I was lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses. They told me that I had been found unconscious in the house, covered in scratches and bruises. They said that I was lucky to be alive. But I knew the truth. Elizabeth had attacked me, her ghostly rage too powerful to resist. I tried to tell the doctors, to explain what had happened, but they just looked at me with pitying eyes. They thought I was delusional, that the stress of inheriting an old, haunted house had caused me to imagine things. But I knew the truth. And as I lay in my hospital bed, I made a decision. I would never go back to that house. I would never let Elizabeth's spirit claim me again. But even now, years later, I can still feel her presence sometimes. In the dark of the night, when I'm alone, I can sense her anger and her pain. And I know that she's still there, waiting for her next victim. So if you ever find yourself near that old house on the edge of town, heed my warning. Stay away.